Welcome to another edition of In the Chute. I'm Brandon Carpenter, and this is my son, Calen Carpenter, with the Hashknife Ranch. Calen, what's in the chute today?
So we just got done talking about winter weather, things you have to do, and we touched on feeding animals and how right now you're feeding about 50% more to the cattle because of just sheer cold. Something we also do is we feed mineral not only to the cows but also to the horses. So, and that's not just in the wintertime, that's year-long
Year
basis.
round. Yep.
And we do mineral blocks like cobalt, salt. And I think there's one other thing. Is it there's
Well, we
another
do
one.
we do a really good mineral program, and
Yeah.
then we mix salt with it, rock salt, so that it slows them down, so they don't just gobble it. I want them to get about 3 ounces a day
Yep.
of mineral per head, and that the salt helps slow that down and kind of get it dialed in. And it depends on what time of year it is. They'll get more with um, certain times of the year. They'll want more. They'll crave more than other times. So that kind of modulates their intake. But then we also put out salt blocks that have a trace mineral in
Right.
one, and then one's got sulfur. Another
Sulfur. That's
has
what it was. The yellow one.
cobalt. Yeah. So
Yeah.
usually those three, and they can have free choice. So we put out a really good mineral, and then we change that when there's green grass, and we go to another type of mineral, another blend for them when they're on a really good fresh grass. And it's also got some fly repellent type of uh, an altazoid is what it's called, that helps to kind of lice or cut the cell wall of any flies, or as they're a membrane, when they emerge into a poop pile, then they don't emerge as flies, they just die. So it kind of
Right.
cuts down on like horn flies, heel flies, that kind of stuff. So it's um, really, it's just managing a couple of aspects of it. But yeah, mineral is important.
And so you said it helps with like flies and stuff, but what specifically about it? Because I know you've looked into this more, definitely more than I have. What is the difference? Because so we get specifically two types. Green grass, you give emerald is what it's called. And when it tends to be more fall, winter time is more gold grass or dry grass, you're going to get the bronze to them. What's the
Right.
difference and why do you give that to the cattle?
Well, it has to do with the amount of protein for one, and just the different growth stage of the grasses will not they'll not need quite as much of one type of mineral as they will another. And so it's a product by Cargill, and this is not a Cargill, you know, promotion at all.
Yeah, we're not sponsored by
Um,
anybody, so we can say whatever
no,
we want.
well, you say, yeah, Cargill, your prices suck. How's that? It's expensive mineral. Um, and there's some things I wish you could do to some of the minerals that, some of their additives they put in it that I'm not wild about. But you get the best you can, and I've tried some all natural type minerals. Uh, they were really inexpensive. That part's good, but you know what? I saw our cattle lose weight. They just did not do as well on that, and so we went back to this more expensive, and it hurts. You're talking $30 for a 50-pound bag of mineral. I
And we
mean,
buy a
that's,
lot of 50-pound bags.
yeah, you're buying several ton of it. So it's not cheap. And then you put the salt with it to kind of modulate it anyway. But depending on what your protein content is, what your grass is doing, whether it's maturing grass, matured grass, or grass that's um, growing fast. So there's different mineral availability, and different types of nutrient availability depending on what stage of the grass growth it's in. And Cargill's made some I think some pretty good products that way, where they're marketing them. And it's an easy way to think of it, really, is the emerald. When your grass is green, you use the emerald.
Yep.
And when the grass is green during those months, then you can have fly issues. So you can choose to get this with or without this product called altazoid in it. The mineral doesn't do this itself. It's an additive to the mineral that helps with the fly control. And I noticed it's significant, makes a significant difference on the amount of flies that are around them when you do or don't feed those products with it. So, And then in the fall, when the grass gets a little cured out and everything turns brown, then you can feed the bronze. And then there's another one I think like a gold or something that you can feed, and it's like, you know what, we generally have these too, but that's more for I think some of your like feedlot animals, things like
Mm.
that that we're not. They're pushing heavier, higher protein feeds at. I haven't got into it that
Is it
much,
supposed to
but
help with like finishing? Is that kind of what you're thinking of?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's supposed to do something like that. But we also live in an area where our weather is, we go from damn cold in the wintertime to damned hot in the summertime. So I
Right.
mean, we don't have kind of an average temperature, uh, 40-degree swing from high to low year round. We don't do that. I mean, we've got some extremes in our stuff, and our growth of our forage shows it.
Well, that's something too, because people have asked me, well, it doesn't get that warm in Montana, does it? I'm like, yeah, it does. You're saying what you're saying about like average temperature. It's absolutely right because I can't tell anybody normally what happens in the summertime. They'll be like, well, how cold does it get in the winter? I was like, well, it can get 40, 50 below without
Right.
wind chill. And like I always say that because wind chill is a huge thing. But then, okay, then during the summertime, it'll get up there to 110, sometimes on a consistent basis. A lot of times it'll just be high 90s with low
Right.
humidity, but it's still high. And they're like, really? I'm like, yeah, I mean, we're north, but you'd be surprised at how hot it gets. But
Yeah.
with
Well,
the,
we're out on a grass prairie too, so
yeah.
we're elevation. The ranch is just under 4,000 feet elevation, so
Hmm.
it's not a high desert, it's not a lowland. It's just a good solid grass prairie that is susceptible to heat. We're not
Yeah.
right close to the mountain. Mountains are 20 miles away.
Now you were we started off with we put out block mineral. So like I said, the cobalt, the normal like salt, and then the one that I missed and you pointed out was sulfur.
Mhm.
So you'll see, essentially blue, red, yellow if you kind of look at it, blue, brown, yellow. And then we've got this loose stuff that we also supplement. What is the biggest difference that you've noticed between the hard block type stuff and the loose mineral stuff that we mix with the salt?
Um, that's an interesting question. It's a little hard to tell because they consume the like the bronze and the emerald with the salt in it. They'll consume that at a
Which is the loose
fairly
stuff.
regular. Yeah,
Yeah.
and they'll and on most of the time we're mixing that at a 2 parts mineral to 1 part salt. So we're
Yeah.
putting of 150 pounds out, we're 50 pounds out of salt, 100 is the mineral. So, but they all consume that, and I can't really measure which animals consume how much. I mean, that's because we got some herds that we got some older cows in it, and then suddenly we've got some first time heifers,
Right.
in it. So it's kind of difficult to monitor that. But I will notice, the block is consumed at a rate when you put them all out evenly. It depends on the time of year. Um, it may depend on the year. Sometimes, man, they'll eat that stuff with the cobalt up like crazy in the summertime, and we just give that free choice. I let them; they can have whatever they want when they want it, and if they have something else, we would give that to them as well. But you will see them hit one of those blocks harder than the other, and essentially, the salt's the same. You may have with the trace mineral, there's several different minerals in that in trace amounts. That's why they call it that. But you may have the cobalt being eaten, and this last summer they ate a lot of cobalt, much more than the sulfur. And there's other years they'll hit the sulfur hard. And I think it's time of year as well. I think the sulfur helps to some extent with some fly control as well.
Hmm.
I mean, I just think that has a little bit to do with that, but it just depends, and I haven't been able to nail down exactly why they're choosing one thing over another. I think it's just because of the forage, whatever the grass they have to have is the larger guess at that. But there's nothing scientific. I'm not keeping track of why amounts, that kind of stuff. But sometimes they'll hit things harder than the other, and it isn't just a one or two animals. It's a whole herd that will, key in on, okay, we need this in our salt or our mineral right now. And the loose mineral has got a very broad spectrum of lots of different minerals in it. So very little sulfur in something like that, very little cobalt, but that's why we have those other standing blocks. And if there's other blocks that they had available that had something else in it, most all this stuff has things like selenium, You don't want to get too much selenium; you'll cause poisoning. You want to have some selenium so they don't have a deficiency. I mean, so there's a lot of different mineral mixes, and some of your ag schools have done a really good job of um, doing that. Some of your experimental stations with
Mhm.
agriculture, with your cattle, hogs, sheep, a lot of different animals uh, have done a lot of experimentation on that and really dialed that in so that you can have a producer of mineral that can pick up a batch of whatever you need. And there's some things that can be customized too, depending on the type of terrain you're at. There's some areas that are, may have a deficiency in something, and you have to make sure you've supplemented and boosted your animals with a little bit more of that in the mineral. So, and you can also do that in some of the custom made feeds that you can get too. So, the cow cakes, instead of getting something generic, you can have them custom make what you want. Of
I'm
course,
sure
you pay
that's
for it.
expensive. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is. It's pricey. Absolutely, it's pricey. But um, if you've got a lot of animals and you're running stuff through, say, a feedlot, and the feed that you're giving them, whether it's a corn silage or hay, and grinding it, whatever you're doing, if you're gonna be cost effective, and you're producing a better animal, and it works,
Right.
and you're getting more for them, you're gonna probably spend that money on it to do it. It's worth it to produce something that's healthy to go into the food chain,
Well,
or it
and
gets there faster.
you brought up like other mineral that kind of brings me to kind of a two-part question. Uh, Growing up, do you remember seeing different mineral that we have today, or do we have different mineral from what was back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s? And then do you have you seen other types of mineral in the store that we just normally don't get?
Yeah, there's different types of mineral, different makers, different brands. When I was a kid, they're
But it's mostly
medicated
the same.
feeds.
Well, it's most the stuff that you see today. It's mostly the same stuff, just different brand, though, right?
Yeah, there's some variation in it though, some
Hmm.
formulation differences, I think, and some of what they put into it. I mean, they're using some brands, most of them, almost all of them, use scrapings from smokestacks. You
Really?
know,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, so there's some things in there that may not be necessarily what you'd want to put in your critter.
Right.
Um, so there's some the carbons, things like that. uh there's in your medicated feeds, that needs to be done with a vet. Anytime you medicate or feed an animal medicated something, you need to have a vet sign off on that.
Well,
and
it's like you
and
going to the doctor. Like, make sure you talk to your
yeah,
physician before you use it or whatnot.
right. And I don't want to necessarily, I don't want to do that. We've never done that. We've never had medicated feeds. uh we're trying to grow healthy enough animals on their own without trying to push something. There used to be a brand, and I don't even know if they're around anymore. They probably are. When I was a kid, called Mormons,
Mhm.
Moormans, I think, and it is, or 10. Anyway, it was a Mormons brand, and it was a red and white striped sack with a kind of a oblong or oval emblem with Mormons written in it, and that was a really popular feed and or mineral at the time. I remember people feeding that out a lot. You'd see that. Cargill's another one. There's just so many different brands. Purina's got stuff. Um, you know, so everybody's, they're all competitors. They're competing for the same type of thing.
Right.
Your formulations is just what's good and what's affordable too. I mean, I'd probably spend a little bit more if I thought it would get us more out of what we're getting. But when you look at our calves and our cows, I think we do okay.
Hmm.
And I've tried the other things and I wasn't satisfied with them. They didn't keep the fleshiness that I wanted to on those cows, and I didn't think the calves yielded the weights that they had before. And so we went back, and those weights on the calves came back up along with fleshiness of the cow. Well, that tells you when you're only changing one thing,
Yep.
that's probably it, right? And your grasses are relatively the same on a short prairie like we got. So that's what I can attribute it to. So it all depends on what you want to put in them. It all at one point, most of it all hits the ground on the other end anyway.
It's
But
true.
how are you able to utilize it before it gets there? So that's
Yeah.
that's the name of the game.
Well, with that, I guess that's mineral. So we'll put the mineral out to pasture.